Hey, everybody. Welcome to Spaceport. I'm Jason Tondro. Who's next?
I'm Jim. Sorry about that.
I'm Aid Smith, Next Generation. That's me. Yeah.
I'm Professor Christopher McLaughlin, and if you saw my Facebook feed this week, you know it. I'm wearing my official Star Trek helmet. I got the siren on and everything.
Oh, wow. That is cool.
Does it have a sound? Can we hear it? Can you turn it on?
I have it muted at the moment because I don't want to ruin the podcast.
Nice save there, Spot. Okay. Before we get a little bit of house cleaning, before we get too far into it, Chris, tell us about your charity project that you're doing this month.
Well, as I'm sure everyone's aware, it's Pride Month, and in honor of that, I am through my own publishing imprint, Ghost Show Press. I am donating every single penny that I make off of our first release so far, World Defenders: The Summit.
Yep.
And when at the end of Pride Month, whatever money is in the account at RPG, Drive Through RPG, I will be handing over to the Elton John AIDS Foundation.
Nice.
And so, if you go over to the Ghost Show Press Facebook page, you can see a link if you want to buy a copy of the book and help out a terrific cause. And there's also just a donation page. If you'd rather not deal with my scribblings and ramblings and just go ahead and donate money directly, you can do that as well with one click of a button. And we certainly thank you for your support of a most worthy cause and in grateful recognition of Pride Month. Can
you tell us how much the balance is right now?
Well, I just got up. I have not checked it, but last time I checked, we were topping $100. I have not checked it today.
Fantastic. So over $100. That's excellent.
Yes,
right.
yes.
We will have a link to that in the show notes for this episode. So please, it'll probably take you to the Ghost Show Press Facebook page, but we'll also include a link to the Drive Through RPG page where you can buy.
And thank you so much for that.
Oh, of course, yeah, and it's a great product. Is it 5 or 6 heroes? I forget now.
There are 6 full heroes, and you get a base, you get a vehicle, and some guidelines for how you might slot these into your particular superhero campaign.
Wow.
And the product covers Mutants and Masterminds Hero. It is the only licensed product for the Sentinel Comics role-playing game.
Okay, nice.
And we've covered Bash and so many other great systems. If you play a super system, we probably have rules. Because Savage World, we probably have rules for it in the package.
Right on. That's fantastic. And cool art by Storm Cook.
Oh, absolutely. He made this thing look so much better than my words.
It looked great. It really looked great. I remember I got to edit some of it. I think I edited the Kickstarter text or something like that, and I got to see all the art early.
Oh, another fantastic job by Storm.
We would love to talk about things we love all day, but instead we're going to talk about Star Trek Generations. I just got done watching this show. I watched it when it first came out. I've probably seen clips of it or bits of it on various cable, over the years. But I had a very dim memory of the film. and you're probably laughing because you figure that's a blessing. But I watched it just recently, just this morning, and I have to confess I thought it was okay. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't really great. And there were parts of it that I thought were really, really good. It was a pits and peaks kind of show. It had some really terrible bits, but I thought that it had some really good bits. But from what I have seen about our outline notes, there's a lot of continuity issues here that I, as a part-time Trekkie, don't get right, frankly. But I remember last week when Aid, you were like, okay, here's how to help us all enjoy the movie. And you were like, it's a Next Generation episode, but it's 2 hours long. Think of it as a Next Gen episode with a bigger budget.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
It's better lit. If anything else, the lighting is amazing. I just think it looks so good. The ready room when it's all that kind of all the outside sun streaming through the windows. That's just so nice.
Yeah, and I watched it like that. I mean, the first opening section with Kirk and everything, of course, is not like a Next Generation episode at all. Although it was strangely sort of written like a Next Generation episode, which maybe we'll talk about. But anyway, let's get to it. So let's rewind. This film came out when?
94.
Yeah,
Okay.
94. Yeah.
What season of Next Generation are we in?
It's over. The last
Yeah.
episode had aired. That, depending on where you were, that May is the preceding May, as I recall.
All right, so this is seen as a transition from the Next
Yes.
Generation show cast
Yes.
from television series to film. But at the same time, Jim, you've often described this as like every Star Trek movie is the last Star Trek movie.
Well, we're not in that zeitgeist anymore.
Okay. So
that is really like, this is the last movie sort of dialogue is only for the original series cast.
okay.
Because you have to think 94 Star Trek wasn't in the zeitgeist, it was the zeitgeist. You can go anywhere and buy Star Trek merchandise. Like Star Trek was on, like there was a picture of Star Trek on an astrology magazine. Like it was just saturated everywhere for the Next Generation.
The Hilton in Vegas had an enormous Star Trek Experience sign out on the strip, and they had the live Star Trek Experience show.
Mm-hmm.
That we don't do that for a niche thing. You do that.
Like, people are showing up to court reporting as Jaws in Star Trek uniforms. Like this is how monumental Trek was at this point of development.
Okay.
Like it wasn't just something people watched. It was like it was everywhere. It was on cereal boxes. Like Chris made the joke about the Spock helmet Star Trek thing. Like they had Trek everywhere. You can't throw Phasor and not hit something Star Trek. Right. And for the longest time, going up into even beginning in season 2, when Star Trek V was supposed to be the last movie.
Yep.
The dialogue was, if Next Generation gets a movie, they need to have a send-off, trade-off movie. There needs to be a cult but called mashup. Like that's where this is heading. So even from like 2, when we're seeing, what does God need for the Star Trek, the conversation, and not just from fans who want these, who fantasy book their own movies all the time.
Yeah.
But from people working on Trek, from the actors, from the producers, from the writers, going like, we need to have something that's a clear baton passing movie, and that's what Generations is supposed to be.
Interesting. And now, so if Next Generation is over, then DS9 is in season.
See, DS9 is in season 3.
Yeah, as I say, 3. Yeah.
And Voyager is.
Voyager's coming out next year, 95 January.
Was it in development?
Yeah, it's in development. So Deep Space Nine, like they spend the first 2 seasons along, the critically acclaimed Next Generation. Yeah. And then they get I think 6 months by themselves, and then Voyager lands mid-season, and Deep Space Nine only has those 6 months of being the only Trek in town.
Aid?
Yeah.
Isn't this exact or very close to when the official setting for Star Trek Adventures RPG is set?
I believe it is. I think it's just before Generations. I think it's kind of in that time. Yeah.
It's peak Trek. Right, this is when the most Trek is going on at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's why they decided on it, because when they decided on what year it was there was like we don't want to get rid of the Enterprise D. I mean, even though the Enterprise E is very cool, it's like it's the iconic thing, and even like the uniforms are iconic as well, and obviously DS9 stuff. We didn't want to go into Dominion War, I believe. So yeah, I think this is why they decided on this. So
and for me, as just a consumer. Star Trek Adventures, when they announced that was the thing I was most concerned about. When they first announced Modiphius gets the contract, I'm thinking, okay, what year is it set in? Because that's going to dictate the game. Because if they set it in Force Contact in that time period, then it becomes more militarized Starfleet.
Yeah.
But when they announced the year, I was like, that's perfect, because that's when Star Trek has the most potential to be anything. It doesn't as a player, you can invest your game to doing whatever you want. You can avoid the Dominion War entirely and proceed you just made a peace treaty with them instead.
Yeah.
And then you go off and you do your own adventures.
All right, so let's talk about how this movie gets made. Chris, you want to start off?
Well, the thing that struck me about the production of this film was, for the only time in Trek history, they actually went to two different parties and had them do a script competition and openly stated the best script wins.
Wow. Okay. That's usually almost always a terrible idea. As a GM, like how many times did it take me to realize that asking your players, hey, what game do you all want me to GM, is the stupidest fucking question ever. Because they will inevitably say, Nazis in space. And I'm like, shit, now I have to run Nazis in space. Right? Never do that. Figure out what game you want to do and then just pitch it and say, you know me, you're either in or you're out. Right?
Well, that was a very common attitude because the executive the practical the guy was practically show running Next Gen at the time. Michael Pillar just said straight up, I won't do this. Either I'm doing the movie or I'm not, and just turned him down flat. Okay.
So I interrupted you. Go on. Please go on.
That's okay. So Ronald Moore and Brandon Braga accepted, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about their script. But the thing that had always fascinated me is the very fact that they asked him. But the competitors for Moore and Braga was the most hated man in the entire history of Star Trek, with the exception of Gene Roddenberry's lawyer, Leonard Maizlish. They went to Maurice Hurley, who had produced the first two seasons of Next Gen, and if you know him in Trek circles, he's the creator of the Borg, and he's also the guy that fired Gates McFadden after season 1.
Oh.
And like Leonard Maizlish, I have yet to find anybody that has a single kind word to say about the man. And yet he's the guy you bring in. So
on the other hand, I mean, the guy who created the Borg, that sounds like a pretty good credential to me.
I'm sure that's how and I understand he was also the main guy pushing for it's the end of the first season episode where we found out the Federation's been invaded by the little parasites. Conspiracy, thank you. Yeah, apparently that was his baby too. So for years, I just knew him as the guy that wrote the two early Trek Next Gen episodes I actually like. but apparently he's a piece of work. I mean, in all my Star Trek research, I like I said, I've yet to find anybody that has a kind word for him. And the only person I can find more hated is Roddenberry's lawyer.
That's true. The other thing that Maurice Hurley has done that he stole from us is the opportunity for George R.R. Martin to pen a Next Generation episode. Because in season 2, George R.R. Martin is working on the Beauty and the Beast show with Ron Perlman, that wonderful classic that still holds up today. And real Trek actors show up on it, like Jeffrey Combs is in like 6 episodes.
Okay.
He pitched to write Star Trek, and Maurice Hurley looked at him and goes, so what are your credentials? And Martin's like, well, I'm a fantasy author. I have several sci-fi credits to my title. I've worked on these other shows. And he goes, Star Trek isn't a sci-fi series. You have to. We are about people.
Wow. Okay. Chris, pick up you are.
Yeah. So I have this perverse fascination when I see something terrible. I always wonder, like, what was their second choice? What was the thing that was even worse than what we got?
Right.
So for years, I've been fascinated about what was the Hurley script that lost to the out.
Yeah.
And I only have his description of it, but here's what Hurley wanted to go with.
Okay.
He wanted to go with. His base idea was the Next Generation crew encounters a race of aliens who pop through a dimensional door, and cutting through the technobabble, the only way they can save their entire planet / universe / whatever is to destroy ours.
Okay.
He described it as, you're a parent on a playground and you see your kid take a bad fall and get hurt, and you just lose your mind and you run and save your kid, and only afterwards do you look back and see all the people that you shoved out of the way and shoved to the ground trying to save your own child.
Okay.
And the question is, and the main plot would be Picard and company trying to stop them. Now, I will confess, I read that and I said, like, wow, a moral dilemma. This is very, 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 very Star Trek.
Yeah.
But in order to comply with the studio decree that there would be some involvement by the previous crew, this was going to be all the Kirk we were going to get. Picard was going to be facing a key decision, and I've heard different things about this, but apparently like Kirk had met them before and beaten them or beaten something similar, or Picard was doubting himself or something along those lines. But anyway, he winds up going to the holodeck and interacting with holodeck William Shatner.
Oh, I see.
And now that took me right back to the Enterprise finale. I'm like, no, no. And it just made my head hurt to think that the goddamn holodeck again. And we start thinking about how the holodeck. Not only could the holodeck not just have gone ahead and told you, we have to. It becomes like a Black Mirror episode. It's like not only is Kirk dead, but somewhere along the line they have a computer record of him that can perfectly recreate him after his death.
Right.
Oh, I mean, just everything. It just reminded me of everything I hated about the holodeck. Yeah. And then the story that blew me away is I'm thinking like, well, it just seemed like, a second draft and refining the Kirk stuff. This could have worked. But according to Brian and Braga, the reason that they went with their script is Hurley never actually finished a draft.
Oh, yeah.
He never got past the original script.
Well,
I'm enough of a writer to realize, if you don't actually finish your book, your publisher is probably going to frown on that.
Well, in the immortal words of Aaron Alston, at the one Gen Con I got to meet him at before he died, if you don't have a manuscript, you've got nothing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like so. No matter we can have a million ideas, but if you can't finish, then there's kind of no point. That's unfortunately much more common than people might. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but I'm still left wondering. Could that germ of an idea that Hurley came up with have led to a better movie?
Jim, you want to pick up from there? How does the film get made?
So I think the biggest sort of takeaway is, yes, they're competing. The studio wants Hurley, and Rick Bowman is championing for Brian Braga and Ron Moore. And the reason why I bring this up is because those two people wrote the last episode of Next Generation, All Good Things.
Oh, which is fantastic.
Which is fantastic. Yeah. It is the best series finale, bar none. It is wonderfully done.
The last episode of MASH still makes me cry.
Yes. Yeah, it's up there, but it's up there. To be put in the same breath as the last episode of MASH.
Yeah.
We can all agree it's good. We can all agree it's really good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we can all agree it's good.
And so the thing is when they were filming that episode, all the actors were distracted because they were focusing on the movie, because movie productions don't happen in a vacuum.
Right.
And at one point, Patrick Stewart gets them all, everyone's sitting down, all the production heads, and it's like, guys, you need to focus. We're doing this episode.
Yeah.
And that sort of broke through the chaos that was in their lives, because they're not only doing a TV show and they're following the Paramount TV rules, but they're also being engaged in this movie project and doing movie project roles. Which are drastically different, because you're going from TV union to movie union. So your wrestle's bigger, right?
Yeah.
Like little weird things that happen on movie sets that don't happen on a TV show, and they'll still try to get the TV show out on time. So that's happening, and the other thing that sort of comes up, and we're going to see again in Star Trek Lower Decks, is they come up with whole new uniforms.
Okay.
So the pre-production designs these gorgeous sort of Next Generation meets Star Trek movie. They've got the asymmetrical flap.
Okay.
But with the Next Generation uniform. So they still have the color. So they're not all monochromatic like in the Maroon Monsters.
Yeah.
And they get so far in production on that until eventually a budget concern shows up, and they're like, no, let's just throw them in Next Generation and Deep Space Nine costumes.
And I can see the zipper every time Picard turns around, zipper's down his back, and I'm like, man.
and the thing is that because movie production takes so long, they sent all those costume ideas to the toy company Playmates. Yeah. So the Next Generation toys all have these interesting looking naval inspired hybrids of the movie uniform and the TV uniform. that we never see anywhere else, but in Star Trek Lower Decks, the cartoon show coming out on CBS All Access soon, they're using a modified, simplified version of those particular uniforms.
That's wild. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so this show comes out, and how does it do financially? Success?
I think it was. I don't think it was like the I don't think it did numbers on par with like Star Trek 2 that they were hoping.
Right.
It made money, but it was the kind of thing where, they said, we've got to do something different next time. Not to get too far ahead into the next podcast, but yeah, it just people realize, this we got to make some changes here.
Was this a Christmas movie?
It was November 11th. I'm thinking
that's a Christmas release. Okay, because it seemed to me, because when Picard wakes up in the Nexus and it's Christmas, it occurred to me I'm sure that they, rather than being a summer blockbuster, they tie it into Christmas and it sort of becomes a Christmas movie. But I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Abe, what about all the rest of the cast? Like we see Chekhov and Scotty and Kirk. What about everybody else? Where's it?
I've read that DeForest Kelly and Leonard Nimoy basically said Star Trek 6 was that was their thing. They put the signatures on it. They're done. Yeah. Obviously, both of those also had appearances in the Next Generation TV series. So that was, they've kind of done their crossover things. As for Nichols and oh my god, I've gone completely blank. George Takei.
Yeah.
I have no idea at all. The only thing I've read about Nichelle Nichols is they were basically saying when Whoopi Goldberg was on set, they didn't tell the cast that they weren't going to be there. They assumed that it was going to be the full original crew.
Okay.
So Whoopi Goldberg shows up.
I actually have a quote from Takei when you're done.
Okay, cool. So Whoopi Goldberg shows up and says, "Okay, well, where's Nichelle Nichols? Obviously, they want to see us." She's not going to be there. She's not coming. It's these three guys. It's effectively. So yeah, it's an odd choice. I mean, I can understand why, because again, it might be a bit crowded, and again, trying to get everyone to do something, I can kind of understand in one way. I mean, Chekhov gets to do a little bit. Scotty gets to do a little bit more. Obviously, Kirk gets to do the bulk of the things. But the idea of everyone running around might seem a bit odd. But I really hope they at least got asked, and that they rejected it rather than. But Chris, if you've something about George Takei, you may know.
Yes, according to him, the draft of the script that he got had Sulu back being the helmsman of the Enterprise. And his main objection was like, wait, in the last movie, I was captain of my own ship.
Yeah.
And that was his main objection. And he said by the time he sent that note back to the studio, they already decided not to use him in the movie. He said they didn't even give me an official chance to turn it down.
Wow. Well, I have to confess, I can totally see that point of view. Like, but I think you're right as well. Like this movie already has a big problem with giving everybody else in the bridge crew something to do. I mean, if you're not Data, Geordi gets kidnapped, right? Like Riker gets to sort of be captain because Picard is off hiding in the ready room after family trauma. But what does poor Troy get to do, right? Like she gets to be helm officer for a while. I guess that's kind of cool. And then that's
the thing that bothers me.
Okay.
Like, this movie has two people in emotional crisis.
Yes. Okay.
Two of the main cast members are in emotional crisis, and you have a fucking counselor on the bridge of the Enterprise.
All she does is
one moment to shine.
She just walks around saying, "Are you okay? Like, are you okay? Is there something I can do?" Okay, I got Riker to do that. Like Riker says, "Is there something I can do?" "No, please leave me alone." Okay. But then let's get Troy in here. Okay, so Jim, tell us what's on your mind about.
So, all right,
we've opened up the can of whoop-ass.
So I think this movie starts a track that we're going to see go through the next 4 films.
Yeah,
which is studio wants to make Next Generation movie. Studio has to make Patrick Stewart, Brent Spinell happy. Because Next Generation equals Brent Spinell and Patrick Stewart in their mind. Similar
to the way that that Nimoy and Shatner had their most favored nation status in the first.
Yeah. So it's sort of that approach, but the difference is Next Generation is more of an ensemble show than TOS ever was.
That's right. It is.
So like you get a whole episode, you get several episodes with just Wolf and Data is background.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like we're just going to write to these two people to make sure that they're happy with the script, and everyone else is just assume that they're going to sign on.
Yeah.
And it always strikes me as, okay, we have a counsel on the bridge. She's supposed to help Picard with negotiations. She's supposed to help the crew manage their emotions and difficult stress things. Yep. And here we have the captain who's emotionally compromised. Yep. His family has died. He's shirking his responsibilities to the point where Riker calls him on it gently on the bridge when he asks a question, and then more directly in his office.
Yeah.
Because Picard should be running this investigation. Romulans have come into the neutral zone.
Right.
And instead, Picard is understandably emotionally distraught. Like, I'm not taking away anything from grief or how it impacts people. But he should not be running the show. But he's running the show because he's the captain, and this is going to be the Picard Kirk crossover.
Yeah.
They give him this story arc where he loses all touch of his family so that he can have a Dickens Christmas Carol in the middle of this movie.
Now, I just want to note, though, that I personally found the scene with Picard and Troy when Picard is talking about his family and he breaks down and cries. I found it to be the most personally affecting moment of the film. I think I felt like they sold it. They sold that scene to me. I thought
it was really good. Yeah, I like that. I thought it was excellent.
That moment where he's talking about his nephew, and his expression just crumbles, and Patrick Stewart is just so good, and I couldn't. And I'm so I watching this movie, and I know it's ridiculous but I was like, he's so young. Watching this movie compared to Picard and thinking he's so young, and of course he's 50 something, but because he's not 80, he looked like a goddamn action hero to me.
We had this with the original crew though. When we're in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, we're like, we're all over the hill now. We're all over the hill. We're gonna be put out to pasture soon. It's got you got 5 moves Eddie. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Jason, I can tell you from experience. The thing about I've been bald since I was 22, and the one good thing about it is you look the same until you actually hit about 50 or 60.
Well, fair enough. All right.
So not only do you have this Picard plot.
Yeah.
But then you give Data emotions. And that's such a high concept.
Yes.
Like the android now has emotions that he can't control.
It's a payoff, right? Because we see the emotion chip, and Data's struggle for emotions was his major arc of the series. And so, like, okay, we're going to the movie, so now this is how Data is different in the film than he is in the show. From a writing narrative standpoint, I see that transition, and it looks cool. But
ultimately, the message of this movie is stow your emotions and keep doing your job. Like the stellar cartography scene, and I love that set. And Aid, I'll let you talk about how gorgeous that set is.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
The stellar cartography scene basically serves two purposes. It's the connecting tissue between the two main storylines of this film, Picard and Data.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, you just gotta put your emotions aside and you just gotta walk through it. And that's such a terrible message to tell someone who's just had emotions for 5 minutes. Like, your emotions are a separate program. They'll separate from you, and you still have to function. Like, I understand, like, if this was a absolute, like, if they were in a final fight, I got it. You got to do what you got to do to survive.
Like when Geordi gets kidnapped, and he's
like when Geordi gets kidnapped. But when it's Data who's experiencing emotions for the very first time, and he has no concept of how to deal with it, he has no tools. And instead of going to Deanna Troi, when, like he does in the TV show, when he experiences the flash of anger when he kills that Borg in Descent, he goes to Troi several times. instead of having that scene where they can explore emotional growth, it's put your emotions aside. Data is off the hook because Geordi comes back. The Enterprise blows up, and Deanna Troi has a conversation where Data's like, "I'm all better."
Yeah,
but there's no reason for him to be all better.
But did you want to?
Can I?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now, Jim, you did your usual fabulous job breaking this story down, and really, I think you set up my point here perfectly. Okay. All right. This is, as you ably said, Aid. Sorry, Jim, you did a great job. But I'm sorry, I'm stealing an Aid quote. Okay. This is a big Next Generation movie. Okay, so the Next Generation has spent 7 years spreading this Roddenberry bullshit about how in the future where there's going to be no conflict between people because we're all going to be self-actualized and happy and cheating on our wives and cheating on our mistresses and everything is going to be awesome and there's going to be none of that stupid religion stuff. Well, I mean, here's a guy who thinks Roddenberry, who honestly believes we're going to outgrow every single emotion other than lust. If this is really a Next Generation story, how could there be any other message?
Well, I don't have an answer for that.
Also, as well, Picard himself, right, defines himself by his duty to Starfleet. Yeah. So the idea, even though when he talks about stuff, I've never had the time to go to family. I've never had time, which is why those episodes where he goes into the other body, which I can't remember, where he gets the flute. Those episodes mean so much to him because he gets to experience something outside of that duty that he has devoted himself to. Right. So the idea, the idea you lock down your emotions to serve, to get this purpose done. There's millions of people possibly in danger. That is where Picard steps up. And he's obviously trying to instill that into Data as well at that point in time. But obviously, to say, you're damaging yourself to perform the duty that is needed of you.
When I watched that scene, and I'm thinking about it now in retrospect, Picard is saying to Data the thing that he's really talking to himself.
Exactly.
Right? Because he's the one that's got trauma and he's trying to talk his way through it. And he's like, okay, we got to put this. He's telling Data, oh, you have to put this aside because I need you right now. But he's really saying is my crew needs me right now and I got to get shit done. It's perfectly in character. The funny thing is until the Picard show, until we saw the Picard show and they explicitly talked about it, I never understood Picard as being that guy, the guy who can't talk about his emotions. He can't. It's right there in front of me, but it never struck me that that's his main problem.
We also see that Picard shuts down as soon as he gets duty removed from him. As soon as he retires from Starfleet, he just becomes a guy sitting on the couch because he hasn't got that duty anymore. So we see that as that's his thing. He defines himself by Starfleet, and without that, he's just, what do I do? I need something to devote myself to.
And that's fine and good for Picard. That's true to Picard's character. That's one of the things that the movie gets right. But the problem is that's the message of the movie.
Yeah.
Like emotional trauma needs to be stowed until some unknown thing happens. Right? Because no one has a counterpoint argument to emotional growth and relating to your emotions in a healthy, fully human way.
Well, I feel like when I think about the message of this movie, it's different than that. I'm not saying it's any better because I'm going to make a really ridiculous comparison, but it's basically you have to put the past behind you, right? Because the Kirk in particular, Kirk's moment in the Nexus, and we had to talk about this because what I really, Jim is like, there's a million problems with that sequence, but what it's about is a second chance, is a do-over, right? Like Kirk explicitly says, I'm going to go in this room and I'm going to do it differently this time and I'm going to do it right. It's the do-over. And as we have learned from a million Hollywood movies, like the do-over never works. Like not only does it never work, but the lesson of most of these movies is don't change your mind. Whatever you did the first time is what you should do again, even though you think it turned out bad, right? Like the whole concept of the do-over is bullshit, right? We don't get a do-over. Like that's the point, is that you don't get a do-over. Like you make mistakes, you live your life, and you have to live with the consequences of that life. And if it's like the monkey in Lion King hitting him over the head and saying, you have to put the past behind you. And that's a stupid little 8-year-old moral. But I think that's kind of the moral of this movie. Anyway. Okay, so since we touched on some things already, let's go back. So let's talk about the Kirk scene. Let's talk the Nexus. We get 2 different characters times in the Nexus. The first one is Picard. And let's talk about this bizarre, 24th century Dickensian Christmas story. Abe, you're the local. Help us with this.
It is odd. Yeah, it is very odd. It does seem to, because it doesn't even, whereas Kirk's one theoretically reflects reality. He said, "Oh, this is my house. This is the thing. This is my uncle's stables." Picard's one actually seems to be fictitious because he didn't own the house. Yeah. The children are dressed in the way they're dressed because for some reason in the back of his mind, that's what kids look like. They look like little people sit on the street corners and sell matches to people as they go by. It's very, very odd. Very, very odd.
Now I'm terrified because now if I ever go into the Nexus, the children are going to be like the way I picture them, and they're going to have claws, and they're going to be, running around tearing up all my stuff, and drooling everywhere. Oh, thank you. Now I never know to stay away from the Nexus.
I had 2 problems with that scene. Number one, Abe, you're exactly right. Who the fuck dresses their children like that? Like that. Secondly, where the hell is Beverly Crusher?
Now the wife is a redhead.
I know, so she's not
there
Beverly.
Is that.
She's fake Beverly. I'm like, what is this, Madeline Pryor, the Star Trek movie?
That's true, yeah. That's pretty good, yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, well,
Cyclops.
Okay. But okay, so who else? Jim, I know you have thoughts about the Picard. We're going to get to the Kirk sequence, but let's do the Picard sequence.
All right. So the thing with the Picard sequence that is just mind-boggling to me. Okay, so let's just take it a step back. We're given a lot of exposition to explain magic. The Nexus is magic. Now, I know Star Trek does a lot of impossible things, but it's always with the caveat that we're doing it either because we have really advanced technology or it's a super being. Like Q can do whatever the hell he wants. We can't stop him. He's a god. We just kind of had to suffer through him, right?
You do realize that Nexus being that string is because there's 2 Qs on either end swipping it like a skipping rope, don't you? That's what it is.
What was that?
the Nexus, because it's a cosmic string, there's a Q at each end flinging it around like a skipping rope. That's what it is.
That is so much better than the service. So we get a lot of people talking about like this, the energy ribbon, and you're phasing in flux, and it can give you whatever you want. So it's whatever the writers need it to be, right?
Yeah.
There was no consistency. There was no explanation for why I can will myself into the Nexus, out of the Nexus, and into it. Why there isn't a double Bacall when I come out 5 minutes before I went in. There's so many weird things about the Nexus, like logistically. You can just boil it down to magic.
And even Guinan, you assume when Guinan first shows up, oh, it's the Guinan from then. Mm-hmm. Still there. No, it's an echo of Guinan, apparently. You go, well, wait a minute, hold on. Because time doesn't matter, but apparently does at that point in time.
Yeah. It's an echo. It's an echo that then knows about being on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So is there an echo of Kirk in the Nexus? Is there an echo of Picard in the it's real. That's how the Dickensian Christmas thing that we keep harping on. And visually, one of the things, so Ron Moore and Brian Braga do their script.
Yeah.
And the script doesn't have the wolf promotion sequence. It doesn't have, and they take it around to different showrunners. So they take it to Michael Pillow and get some notes. They take it to Robert Hewitt Wolf and he gives some notes. And they take it to Jerry Taylor. Okay. And Jerry Taylor's big note after the Enterprise D sequence was, I want you to have a scene where Picard is moving an egg along the countertop of tenfold with his nose. and the writers are like, what are you talking about? And Jerry Taylor goes, you have a Starship sequence after a Starship sequence when you're introducing the Next Generation crew, and I need something visually different. So that flips the script in their mind, and they start doing the unexpected. Like the whole script is then going against expectations.
Okay.
So Picard, you would expect him to be living some sort of past, like doing something involving the past, and he gets this alternate reality Christmas Carol thing.
Yeah.
That's just kind of weird. And visually, it's different than what you would expect from a Next Generation movie. And on top of that, like the toys, this is really weird. The toys on Odd Collection, like the little girl has a doll.
Yeah.
But the kid is playing with a G.I. Joe 1994 G.I. Joe model. Like,
yeah, I noticed that because I thought it was literally all going to be. Yeah, I thought it was all going to be dolls and no, and then because the spaceship comes out and think, whoa, hold on, wait a minute. Yeah,
it's the fighter jet, and I know that toy, like it came out like that summer. Like it's just this weird hodgepodge of visual imagery and clues, and it feels like in a good story, you have people that react to situations and they overcome, and you can see the struggle of them overcoming it, whether that's an internal struggle or an external struggle. And for many parts of the Nexus, it just feels like people going through the motions. Guinan shows up. Why does Guinan show up? Because Picard needs to know the other exposition. Picard needs to be pointed in Kirk's direction.
The worst thing about it as well is the fact that they should have used Chateau Picard. Chateau Picard has always been established in at least 2 episodes, in the one after the Borg 2-part, and obviously in All Good Things, as an existing place. Yeah. The idea that he was supposed to retire there in All Good Things, and obviously we see it in Picard. Why did they just use Chateau Picard? He could have had a wife and children, but at least the visuals of him walking up the past all the wine, the grapes and all that kind of stuff would have made sense in relation to the stuff we've seen in the show.
Aid, I don't know why I'm defending the script at all, but you could make you could make the argument that maybe with the trauma of his family having been burned to death there so fresh in his mind, he's not ready to go back there.
That's true.
And if you think about it, if you think about it, it adds a little extra layer to Picard in that he's either made peace with the loss of his family, or he's just so beaten down by the events leading up to Picard, he just doesn't give a shit anymore. He finally goes back to the chateau.
But even that would have made sense if the scene would have been him going up to Chateau Picard and his nephew and his brother being there would at least make some sense, because like, okay, that's the place I want to be. This exact point in time, that is the place I want to be. His nephew is in this, but as a smaller child, because his nephew's, I think, actually older in reality, I believe, unless I'm mistaken.
You see, I knew I shouldn't have tried to defend this script.
The actors for the brother and nephew from the series should have been in this movie.
Yeah.
And how much more powerful would it have been? Like fantasy booking. How much more powerful would it have been had Picard showed up at the chateau and it's on file, and has the opportunity to quote unquote, rescue his brother and his nephew, and that's how he realizes this isn't real.
Yeah,
like that. If you made that the scene, like because they have the Chateau Picard set.
Yeah, exactly.
They know the location. They can go to it. And they did go to it again when they went to All Good Things. Like, how much stronger would that have made that plot thread to the point where he's like, oh, I actually have to physically let go of them. Like, they kind of allude to Renee being there, but it's not the same actor.
Right.
Yeah, I think the kid. I think he's actually a younger kid because he definitely says it's his nephew. So obviously there's a physical representation of him in the Nexus. Yeah.
Mm. So then that leads us to Kirk.
So now we go to the Kirk scene, and now what bugs me now? I've given up. I've hung up my Carol Marcus torch. Right, like I for years I thought it should have been Carol Marcus, but okay, let's presume that because she's not in 3, that something happened and they have gone their separate ways, acknowledging their friendship, but it's not there anymore. Okay. But introducing a new person that no one in the audience knows.
Yes.
And we don't even see her face. She's a fucking silhouette on a horse.
Yes.
And this movie could not more objectify this character. And then and there's just no personality. Anyway,
she's a silhouette on a horse.
I have a story about that.
Okay.
I have a story about that, actually.
Yeah. Chris, start us off because I know Jim's got a new casting for who that should be.
Okay.
Start us
So
off.
while doing some research for this,
Yeah.
I found out that in Moore and Braga's first draft, it was Edith Keeler.
Okay. Yes.
And they were they were telling the studio, how cool would it be to get Joan Collins to come back?
Yeah.
And the note that they got in return was, well, we don't want this movie to confuse people that aren't familiar with Star Trek. And I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
How does bringing back a character from what is usually rated as the #1 Star Trek episode of all time, how is that any more or less confusing than bringing up this character that we've never heard from before?
And
it got me to thinking about how it's sort of an endemic problem to too many of the Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
They try to pin the grand emotional and plot moments of these films on characters that straight up don't earn it. Part of the reason that Star Trek V doesn't work for me is because we're supposed to take Cyborg seriously because we get this quick mic drop that he's Spock's brother.
Right.
And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't make you care about this character or wonder what he's about. Khan obviously has the gravitas. V'ger, one didn't work because we don't give a shit about V'ger. They kind of skate by in 3 and 6 because Klingon, you got enough that comes along with any generic Klingon. And here we go again. We're hanging Kirk's romance on a character we've never heard of before, and spoiler, we're hanging this movie on a villain that we ultimately don't give a shit about.
This is a funny. What I mentioned in the notes beforehand. The original movies, their plot threads are created in the movies. Effectively, apart from Khan. Oh, it's the bad guy. Even not the Spock trilogy is something that happened in the film. Largely, the stuff in the movie. With this, they do have those things. We've got the Duras sisters. We've got the emotion chip. We've got this, that, and the other. So there is a lot of stuff in there that they have pulled from the stuff, and they expect people to know that. When the Klingons just show up, it's like, well, who are they? Oh yeah, they're from that episode. So the idea they do go, hey, why don't we do this, go the extra mile and do a character people recognise for Kirk's part? Nah, screw it. Let's do somebody.
Exactly.
It's such a weird option.
Exactly.
This movie seems to have a real struggle with continuity. It seems to ignore continuity when it needs it and then use continuity when it doesn't.
Yes.
Jim, give us your Edith Keeler pitch.
So Colt's
now, for those who are listening to the show and don't know who the hell Edith Keeler is, can you remind us of the episode?
Okay, so in the episode "City on the Edge of Forever," written by Harlan Ellison and heavily rewritten by DC Fontana,
yep.
McCoy is drugs himself, loses touch with reality, beams down to a planet that has the Guardian of Forever, jumps in, goes back in time, saves a woman's life because she's kind to him, and inadvertently causes the Allies to lose World War II.
No do-overs.
So Colt goes back in the time to fix McCoy's mistake, winds up falling in love with Edith Keeler, who runs a soup kitchen.
Okay.
And she's in the basement and she's talking about, tomorrow. She's talking about after we figure out all the problems that we have, we're going to go to the storm. So she's like this futurist.
Yeah, okay.
And it's her idealism that causes FDR to pause in terms of entering into World War II.
Okay.
But while in the episode, to make their bread and butter, Kirk and Spock are working at the soup kitchen. Okay. So they're making a small difference in the lives of individual people. I can understand you don't want to build the original classic series Trek bridge. I can understand you can't do that. Like it's expensive, and now we have fan studios. But at the time, the idea of building a whole classic bridge and like trying to de-age Colt to be his virile self, like I can see that's beyond the pale of budgetary reasons. But having Colt go back in time to working in the soup kitchen, you can then have the cooking scene, and the cooking scene makes sense because he's giving food out to people who need it.
No horses.
You slowly just tie in, like Chris's point. You tie this episode into like the great moment, like the greatest love story that never happened because Nazis.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like,
and instead we get this City Slickles thing. And in City Slickles, Coley is talking about the greatest romance. When he's out in the field one day, he looks up, he sees a woman on a horse. They acknowledge each other's presence. He falls in love, and they never say a word to each other. And that's what Antonio is.
Okay.
And it just bothers me because not only that, but we enter into Kirk's life in a moment that we know from Wrath of Khan, which is Kirk is dissatisfied with where his life is at, and he's grumpy. Like, essentially, Wrath of Khan is grumpy Kirk. He's getting old. He's an admiral. But now we introduce this idea that he's retired, which has never come up in the movies because we just watched all the movies.
Right.
The idea that Kirk takes a sabbatical from Starfleet is new. That's a retcon.
That's McCoy's thing. He does that all the while.
Yeah. So we've given this plot point from another character to Kirk and superimposed it into a time period months before Wrath of Khan starts, because Wrath of Khan starts on March 23rd with Captain Kirk's birthday. All right. So a few months before that, he's retired and he has a house and he has a cabin and he's got butler and he's retired long enough that he goes and makes a decision, I need to get back into Starfleet. All right? And so it's this weird moment in this character's life that has never been mentioned, never expounded on, isn't in the original text, and it's really there so that William Shatner can rent out his horses to the production.
That's what I was thinking too, because I remember when we watched 5, and I think I asked, like, are there horses on Nimbus 3 just so that Shatner can ride a horse? And Chris was like, yep, pretty much.
This is the thing. Again,
yeah, and Jim brings up another great example of what I'm talking about. It's this other out of nowhere moment that is supposed to instantly carry one of the great dramatic moments of the movie. And just like I'm Spock's brother doesn't do it, this moment fails as well. It just does not have the gravitas that we.
The idea that the Nexus version of Kirk is living with Carol, Marcus, and David would mean something.
Mm-hmm.
That would be something. At least then it was like, okay, we grow old together. David's come from Starfleet Academy and pop round for dinner. You know, just something like that would make sense. But fictitious lady on a horse.
And Edith Keeler being there would definitely underscore how this isn't real.
Yes.
Yeah. I would have loved to have seen aging Kirk with an aging Edith in like the 50s or something, right? Like she gets older, he's older. What would their life have been like if they had continued in? Maybe it would be the 60s. Maybe he'd be watching Star Trek on television. But,
so you're going to Avengers Endgame this, huh?
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, what I would have preferred would have been Carol Marcus. But for it to be Carol, she would have had to appear in 3, and she doesn't. So, I mean, in 4.
To Aid's point and to your point, it could still be Carol Marcus because that's a name with cachet.
Yeah.
Like, it can't be Dr. Noel. Like, she's a character from an episode, but it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's a hollow thing.
Both of the captains, like, not only does Kirk have the nobody, Picard has the not Beverly, and it's just so weird. Like, was it I presumed it was a budget thing. Like, they didn't have.
Oh yes, yes.
I think for the Beverly thing, because I was watching this remotely with my friend Bree, who's in Indiana, and she points out that the way the woman is introduced, like with the hand and then the camera pulling back, like you expect it's going to be a Beverly reveal.
Yes,
and it's not Beverly. So my thinking is they didn't want to use Beverly because they didn't want to confuse the audience and think that somehow the Enterprise D crew also came into the Nexus.
That sounds like a writer's room conversation.
Although Guinan is in there and she's also in the Enterprise D as
the
well.
writers would be like, they're going to think that it's the Beverly that they just saw, and how is she in here? And we'd have to explain that, and that's 2 minutes we don't want to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right.
But if it's Beverly, it means something to us.
Yes, right, exactly.
Like, as an audience member, Beverly means way more than random.
We're going to have to talk about the ending at some point. But before we do, I want to rewind to the beginning of the film and the whole sequence on the Enterprise bridge with the new captain. What's his name?
Harriman,
yes.
Now, we've talked about the long history of every captain other than Kirk being an idiot. But but that's all. It's only in the movies. In the film and the television shows, they're normally like evil. But in the films, they're just dumb. Now there are exceptions, and but it's that this trend sort of starts with 3, right? But I actually had sympathy for Harriman in this scene because although they make a lot of fun of him and the Tuesday running gag, but when he hears the emergency alert and he thinks for a second, and we all know it's too long, it's taking him too long to think, he's thinking, I don't have shit on this ship. I don't have tractor beams, I don't have a medical staff, I don't have any of the things that I need. The people around me don't know I don't have those things. They're going to think I'm some kind of colossal nincompoop, but we don't have the tools. So I sympathized with what he was doing there. And as the rest of the scene plays out and we realize why he said we can't do this, I got it. And I don't know. I feel like he kind of got the short end of the stick. I felt sympathy for the character.
I like Harriman.
So John Harriman is better sold because Peter David has a thing for hard luck cases.
Okay.
And he's written like those are Damora Sulu book that Peter David wrote.
Which I've read. Yeah.
And those are a couple short stories he's written where essentially John Harriman is promoted before his time, and he knows this. He's aware of this is because his dad's an admiral.
Okay.
But so the struggle that Harriman has in these other walks is standing up to his dad and taking ownership of what happened to Kirk on the Enterprise.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like for me that's the continuity that kind of washes over the scene where it's I can see it from an audience member's point of view, but from a character point of view who's read the ancillary material, this is like that turning moment for him to stand up and actually become something greater.
Yeah.
Okay, I just had a thought as well about the entire that scene as well.
Yeah.
Right. They are just coming out of space dock, which is obviously theoretically is a United Planitia, I believe, in Mars, and they're saying about go quick run around Jupiter and back again. Yeah. How close was the Nexus string to Earth then at that point in time? Because it must have been literally on the doorstep.
It's always the nearest ship in the sector.
That's what I mean, exactly. Because it's not as though they're out there. It's again, we're talking same problem we had last time. Oh, there's no ships around Earth at the moment. Yeah, they're all busy.
It's completely preposterous.
But the other thing being is Guinan is on Earth in the 1800s in Time's Arrow, but she obviously goes back to her own planet to be a refugee from that planet when the Borg come along and bring Saw and women. Oh, so again, it's like, where? Is there a tax service that runs between Alaluran and Earth? It's a weird one. Very odd.
If a lot of games, like I play a lot of Fate, the Fate RPG, and Fate has this thing called aspects where you can put like a phrase on a movie or on a show, on a story, and players can invoke it whenever they want. And they spend a point from their resource and they can invoke that thing and make that thing be true. Star Trek as a whole franchise has the only ship in the sector as an
That sounds fair.
Player, including the GM, can just tag that motherfucker and mean you have to show up at this. This is the adventure, gang, and I don't care how much little sense it makes. Like, you're coming, right?
So I was watching this movie with Bree, and Bree is a linguistics teacher.
Okay.
She has a linguistics background, and she has an ear for dialogue that I actually escapes me.
Yeah.
In terms of like the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
And she pointed out when we're watching the movie when it's the Kirk, Chekhov, Scotty banter.
Yeah.
It's like the Scotty dialogue makes sense that it's more it's as if it's written for Scotty up until the point where he starts giving exposition about the Nexus field.
The technobabble is all bad.
The technobabble,
Yeah.
She pointed out, she's like, that's Spock's voice. And the McCoy, like the Chekhov lines, she was like, that's McCoy's lines. Like, why Chekhov shouldn't be saying this in the way these sentences are constructed. And I hadn't even mentioned to her. I said, yes, originally this script was written for Bones and Spock, but those actors decided not to do it, so it was hastily rewritten for the two actors who would show up, which would be Scotty, Jimmy Doohan, and Walter Koenig.
Well, I think the problem is it wasn't rewritten. They just changed the character names.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Just scrub them out and
When Scotty says, "Captain, is there something wrong with your chair?" That is a total Spock line.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is actually one of those good lines in the movie. That I'm like, that's a funny line, but it is supposed to come from Spock.
Yeah. All right. So
it would also have the weight of all the years that Spock has stood next to Kirk in the chair.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because Scotty never feels that void, but Spock does.
Yeah. It becomes a joke on I miss my old chair. Right.
Yeah.
It becomes a joke about So
now Jim is touching upon one of the two main things that just killed me about this movie.
Oh, and just don't forget to tell us about setting the.
That's what I'm going to transition to before we get too deep in the weeds. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. One of the great loves of my life, and the thing that I might see if I go to the Nexus, is good old fashioned Southern wrestling. Love good old fashioned. I grew up with it. I loved it until the time that it became all Vince McMahon and murdery and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But there is a great saying from booking old time Southern wrestling.
Okay.
When you're putting together a wrestling card, which has the same exact objective that Paramount had in all this, let's put on a show and let's try to sell as many tickets as we possibly can.
Yeah.
When you're having to make the tough decisions and booking a wrestling card, I believe this is generally attributed to Jerry Jarrett, who ran the Memphis territory for years. But he had a saying: look at a name and go, will the fans set the seats on fire if this guy is not on the card?
Okay.
So here's my thing. Okay. Yeah. They had been talking about doing a next gen classic cast crossover as far back as the planning stages of Star Trek 6.
Right.
Okay, now you finally made up your mind to do that movie. And then here's what I don't get. You immediately decide, well, it's got to be the entire next generation cast. And as much as these people are beautiful human beings and had decent to good episodes, are the fans going to set the seats on fire if Dr. Crusher is not in the movie? Are the fans going to set the seats on fire if Counselor Troy is not in the movie? And if you're leaning towards saying yes, let me posit you another alternative. Okay. Instead of sweating, how are we going to get Gates McFadden 2 lines? Why not just do a script where you have Kirk, Spock, McCoy with real dialogue and real storyline where they've got to team up with Picard, Riker, and Data. And if you got a little extra money left over, throw in Worf and Scotty. There's your movie. There's your $500 million box office.
Okay.
Now, you're going to have to deal with some hurt feelings on LeVar Burton's part, I'm sure. But here's the thing. If it's one thing these Trek actors have proven time and time again, you put enough zeros on the check, they'll be there. They will be there. I don't really see LeVar Burton saying, "Oh no, I'm going to do the Reading Rainbow convention circuit rather than do the next Trek movie."
Hey, don't.
And here's the thing: if you're going to shove somebody, or put it bluntly, if you're going to make somebody do a 3-line cameo appearance, let's give that to Counselor Troy rather than Mr. Spock. So there you go. I want to see the movie that they made with the attitude of, will the fans set the seats on fire?
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Chris. Jim.
So I don't exactly know where to go from there.
Yeah.
I can do my second point if you want.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to follow up on my idea of a lack of gravitas. Okay. Malcolm McDowell is a fabulous actor.
Yes, he's really.
I mean, yeah, I sorely wish that man had gotten more than like 3 parts in his whole career that really show you the capability of what he can do as an actor.
We're gonna go back to Time After Time again, I hope, because I love that movie and he's the hero.
Oh well, okay, that would make 4. That would make 4. Okay, but still, it seems like he should have had a bigger career than he did. Yeah. But here's the thing. With all of this, Nexus and Picard's family, everything, they never really build the villain up to be the guy who's going to kill Kirk. He just never seems like the guy who has earned this. This would be like, you're like 90s WWE. You do a storyline where Stone Cold Steve Austin gets pinned by a 4-year-old in the front row. I mean, it's shocking. It gets people talking, but you're like, wow, this is dramatically unsatisfying. And the thing is, I think I still have a solid criticism of why the story didn't work for me, but I kept coming back to, okay, who would have been the villain big enough to take down Kirk? And I just go, well, that was number 2. That was the second movie. That ship has sailed. And so it just makes me question the whole thing. Like if you don't have a villain big enough to do the job, if you don't have a crisis big enough to do it, and 230 million aliens that we never ever see is sure as hell not going to do it, why not just drop the whole Kirk death angle? You do not have a villain. You have a movie that's already way too overcrowded. You don't have a villain or the stakes in mind that justifies it. Why not just drop it?
It's probably how they got Shatner to be in it in the first place, is by giving
so let's pivot to talking about the last scene.
Yeah.
Right. My whole joke on my name right now, Bridge on the Captain.
But before we get to, I just want to note that I actually thought that Malcolm McDowell was okay. You're right. He's not a big. My girl Tess Mocker is making lots of noises. It's not that it could have been a big hammy scene chewing bit. But McDowell plays it not like that for most of the film, and he plays it fairly straight. And I thought he was okay.
We can agree he has the best line in the whole movie,
which is,
"Time is the fire in which we burn."
Oh yeah. But I thought he was okay, and maybe that's just me, but because I love Malcolm McDowell like you do, Chris, and he's such a wonderful character actor, and so maybe I was bringing the gravitas of the actor into the role.
Well, it certainly helps. I mean, really. I mean, the only way this movie could have gotten worse is if he'd been played by Lawrence Luckinbill or some guy, or Neil Connery or somebody, that just like who.
But
so the thing about Soren as well, is theoretically he's got some relationship with the Klingons. Yes. Which is probably where he learned how to fight, not being funny, because he's supposed to be Dr. Soren. He's not supposed to be, martial arts Soren. He's so theoretically that's somewhere along the line there as well. Yeah. But also, we know nothing of his Nexus experience. He doesn't even mention why he wants to go back, except for, it's the perfect place ever. There's nothing there. Does he say his family's there? Does he say it's, there's no kind of like how he explains it. So you don't understand. This is why I need to go back. It's the only place I can see my family again. It's the only that I'm willing to kill these other people. There's nothing.
And A just hit upon another great weakness of this movie.
Yeah.
Soren's whole motivation is his family that we never see.
Right.
This may be the most tell, don't show Star Trek movie of them all.
And you're right, Abe, because now that you've mentioned it, I mean, obviously it's his family in there, right? Like it should. Obviously, when he goes into the Nexus, he's surrounded by his family who are not dead. But why do we not see that? Why don't we? Yeah, you're right.
Tell, don't show.
All right, so I mentioned in a previous episode that I know where these climactic scenes were filmed. I lived in Vegas and the Valley of Fire, complete with that rusted old metal scaffolding and everything. They didn't build for the set. That's there.
I did wonder why it was so irregularly shaped. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
I climbed up that thing one time and watched the Perseid meteor shower at like 10 o'clock at night before the park.
Wow.
But it's okay. So, Jim, what are your thoughts on the death scene, the death of Kirk?
So, Kirk dies in this movie twice. Right. Yes. He dies defending a starship named Enterprise, not his starship, but a starship named Enterprise.
Yeah.
We have the death of an Enterprise. We have the Enterprise D crash lands.
Yes.
And then we have the death of Kirk.
Yes.
Now, the thing about the Kirk death sequence as it's filmed that bothers me is that the original death sequence that they drafted was the exact same movie, except Soren shoots Kirk in the back.
Yeah.
Oh.
Much the way the Sands of Iwo Jima ends, after the battle's been won, after the Allies are raising the flag, he's shot in the back, and he dies
Well,
on the
you're
beach.
leaving out one very, very important detail.
What's that?
If I may. Immediately before Soren shoots him in the back, he turns to Picard and says, "The 24th century's not too tough." So the shoot in the back is almost like the wacky trombone noise. Wah, wah, wah.
It's the ending of Wash in Serenity.
Mm-hmm.
It's a surprise death. It's a shock death when you think that the conflict is over.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And again, that goes to the point of doing things unexpectedly.
Yeah.
We don't get to see we don't get to see the whole crew of the original series one last time, even though it's kind of teased as such. We don't get to see Kirk and Picard's meeting with any consequences. It's in the kitchen. Yeah. They have some good lines on the horse. I love the speech on the horse. I think it's better than this movie deserves. Oh. It's the most meaning, and it's the one time both characters are acting the way they should be based on the years that we've spent with them. That sequence from beginning to end, I think, is great. Like once he gets on the horse and he jumps over the thing, with the exception of Antonio as a silhouette on the horse, on the hill, I think the whole thing works for me in a way that the rest of this movie doesn't. But essentially, you have a villain who's struggling with the same thing that our hero is struggling. He's having an emotional crisis. He has lost his family. He's trying to escape. And the only way we can deal with it is we blow him up. Like that doesn't strike me as a Star Trek or even a Picard solution.
Right. We should really heal Soren.
Yeah. Like Soren doesn't need to be Khan. We're trying to put him in this Khan role because that's what the one Star Trek movie has made a ton of money on. But it doesn't need to do that.
Although technically speaking, the locks he puts on the rocket were possibly just to destroy the rocket. Soren was just too near. It wasn't like hey Soren, go and look at those buttons over there. Oh, I caught you out. So
right.
So it could have just been accidental.
The Soren's death was accidental. Yeah. Right. We didn't mean to blow him up. We rigged the bombs. We rigged the missile the only way we could, and then he ran right over to him.
Yeah. So it's just for me, it's if the whole movie is Picard has to come to the point of the last speech, right? Like the whole movie builds up to the last speech, broken Enterprise, Picard Reichel on the Enterprise D for the last time, touching the broken shell, and saying that, we move on from past failures. We move on from pain. Those are life after death.
Right. It's not about what you leave behind, he says. It's about how you live in the present. Yeah.
And that you ultimately move forward. I don't feel that speech, again, one of the better discussions in the episode, in the movie, I should say, is warranted by anything that's happened before it.
It's not earned.
Because, like, I'm going back to Star Trek 3. Kirk still reaches his hand out to Kirk. After everything Kirk's done, the ending of the film, he reaches out, he tries to save him.
Yeah. And it's only one.
Kirk grabs his ankle and tries to bring him down.
Yeah.
At no point does Picard try to do that. Picard does not say, hey, I have had an emotional breakthrough in this film, and I can share that knowledge with you because that's the human thing to do. Instead, it's three men fighting over their retirement plan on a mountain.
But that's the problem with not showing Soren's motivation. We're not showing anything like that. You've got nothing to Picard to hang on to. There's nothing for him to say, well, I've seen what I've, so there's nothing there. Yeah.
Imagine if Picard said to Guinan, like, okay, I want to see what he saw. Show me what Soren did when he was here. And then we see that. And then Picard uses that to persuade Soren to not shoot the missile, right?
Well, also, technically speaking, they could be a duplicate Soren anyway from the original time he hit it. and also another copy of Soren when he went into it from the time when the Enterprise was destroyed. So there could be multiple things going. But yeah.
I saw
you all can hear the point where I just throw this in the trash and go and look at whatever Maurice Hurley actually finished.
Yes.
So for me, one of the things that defines Star Trek is empathy.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, the Gorn episode is two guys fighting in the desert, and at the very end, Kirk gets the upper hand and is about to impale him with his knife, and he goes, "No, I won't do it." There's always an expression of empathy, and I feel like when we watch these movies, empathy is the first thing that gets thrown out the airlock.
Yeah.
At no point are we trying to empathize with the other. We're just trying to give the audience big explosions. And these movies come off as hollow representations. And the thing is like the movies are probably the thing that people revisit the most because they're easy to put on. They last for 2 hours, and you can walk away from them. Like I know as a Star Trek fan, the things I've watched the most are probably the films. And it's always with this idea of this gnawing sense of if this was a TV show, we would try to empathize with someone. We would try to understand him. We would go to his Nexus thing. And we would try to help him move past the angle in much the same way the hero has to move past his grief. And
Jim, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jim, I think you raise a fabulous point, and you remind me of one of the other big what ifs about this movie that sort of stuck with me is they had to cut 2 major sequences out of the final draft script. And one of the ones they lost was after the saucer section crashes on the planet, we find out that Lursa and Bator and her people, at least some of them, survived. Oh. And Commander Data, with his emotion ship still on the whack, has to lead a negotiation between the Enterprise people and the Klingon people. And apparently there was a scene where like Counselor Troy has to coach Data up for what he needs to do. And I don't know if it would have made it a better movie, but I mean, yeah, I mean, if for those people who appreciate the empathetic aspects of Star Trek, actually sitting down and talking about talking through a problem, if nothing else, that sure as hell very next gen.
The interesting thing about the Klingons' motivation is that they're trying to take back the Klingon Empire. They're not just trying to destroy Federation like every other Klingon has in all the movies. It's like they actually have a different target this time around. So
but I can't take Lursa and her sister seriously as villains. They're clowns. They're like clowns in Klingon makeup. I mean, I see them as comic relief in this movie, frankly.
Well, they're certainly funnier than the actual comic relief.
Yeah.
So the funny thing about those actresses, was so all the Klingons had like during the days of Next Generation, all the Klingons had like one trailer. They had to show up hours early to get all the prosthetics on.
Okay.
And they're doing this plot thread is set up in an episode of Deep Space Nine, in like the second or third episode, because they show up there and they're trying to get some sort of contraband that winds up being trilithium. So there's a little bit of a nod to that. Okay. But when they're filming this movie, Robert O'Reilly is getting his makeup on for the House of Quark episode on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And the two actresses come in and goes, "We just got signed for the movie. Isn't that wonderful? We're so happy." And Robert O'Reilly turns to him and goes, "You're going to die." There's no script. There's no script. And he goes, "You're going to die." And they're like, what do you mean? He goes, "Haven't you watched any of the movies? They kill off the Klingons. I've got a job for at least the next 7 years on Deep Space Nine."
Well, Jim, you had one other thing from the outline that I don't know if we've talked about already, that you had like a big plot hole in this film.
Oh, that was actually me, actually.
Oh, that was you. Chris,
Yes.
Have we already touched on it?
No.
Okay, hit us with it.
No. I came away from when I walked out of that theater back in 1994. I came out of it mildly disappointed. That was my initial reaction. Like, this wasn't good. Okay. But I got to talking about it with one of my longest friends, my dear friend Scott Connor, and I asked him for his reaction on this. And I have to give credit to Scott here. Scott said to me, "This has the biggest plot hole in the history of Star Trek."
Which is?
And we've all got our favorites, right? Why didn't they send a shuttle down to rescue Sulu in Naked Time? But to my knowledge and to my satisfaction, I think Scott nailed it. This is the biggest plot hole in the history of Trek. Okay, the Nexus.
Yes.
It follows a course which can be tracked because Soren has been doing it obsessively for years.
Yeah.
For some reason, he has to blow up a sun to change its course.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Maybe I can swallow that. Like Lursa and Baitor won't just fly him out there because they need his skills for whatever. But when Kirk and Picard find this out, why on earth don't they just go, "Oh, you need to get to this Nexus thing? I'll loan you a shuttlecraft." Movie over.
Well, they addressed
He just flies the shuttlecraft into the Nexus, and the movie's over.
They addressed this in the movie, though, Chris.
How? Where?
Like they ask Jim, help me out here.
Yeah, they say that any ship that enters Nexus has either been destroyed or disabled.
Yeah.
So, but they also,
okay, he flies
also
the
says
shuttlecraft.
people are phasing in and out. So obviously, it is affecting them. And obviously, Soren has obviously been in it because he was on the ship at the time. So theoretically, yeah, there is a very good chance if you flew a ship up there, you will be taken into the Nexus before the ship blew up around you.
Or worst case scenario, you fly the shuttlecraft to the Nexus and beam yourself in it, or put
that's
on
what I wondered about.
put on a vac suit and slowly drift into it.
Yeah, you could fire your retros like Spock did in the classic.
And when my friend Scott told me that, I wanted to go back to the theater, rip one of the seats off the floor, and fling it at the screen.
So the thing about that, Chris, is as we've seen in the Nexus, whatever clothes you have on when you go into the Nexus are the clothes you're stuck with. So even though all of reality is recreated, you're going to be wearing a spacesuit. You can't take the helmet off. You're just going to be wearing a spacesuit.
Right.
And then beam into it.
That might be what it is, but yeah.
We are doing First Contact next week.
Okay. Before we finish this up, two things.
Okay.
2 things. Okay. Right. First of all,
and we're going to give you last word today.
Okay, well, you don't have to give me last word because it's not going to be that interesting. Okay, so we did talk about stair cartography. Fantastic, love stair cartography. Very, very cool. The other thing is looking at. They mentioned the Bozeman, which is theoretically the Bozeman from Cause and Effect, theoretically, or at least a ship named as the Bozeman, because that was the ship from Cause and Effect, correct? That's the Bozeman. Yes, they mentioned that. Anyway, I thought that was quite interesting. Nice nod to the thing. Why is Whoopi Goldberg not got a credit on this movie? Does anybody know? She's uncredited. Yeah, and it just seems like what you didn't credit Guinan. This seems really ridiculous. I do not understand that fact.
I don't know.
You got me?
No, it's just so weird. It's just such a strange thing. But there you go. I mean, they credit. I mean, I watched the credits. I was going through IMDb to find this thing, and they credit "Girl with Teddy Bear" as on there, but they do not credit Guinan. What the hell?
All right, the goal with Teddy Bear during my watch along with Bree, the goal with Teddy Bear wound up being like a 10-minute conversation because it was so strange. It was so strange. We paused the credits and we could not understand why the goal, who is literally carried through the whole scene by LeVar Burton, is credited.
Yeah.
I figured that when I saw the teddy bear get dropped and I saw the kid reaching for the teddy bear, I thought, okay, that's waiting for a callback. There's going to be a scene later where they dig the teddy bear out of the wreckage and they give it to the little girl or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that was for. But that scene got cut and never filmed. But they kept the initial part because they wanted to show LeVar Burton carrying the people.
Just remember my second point as well. My second point is the speech on the bridge, the destroyed Enterprise right at the end. Now, if you're watching that not knowing that there's going to be another movie coming along, that seems like say, hey, there's going to be another crew next time because this is it. We have now wrapped up this. The Enterprise D's gone. He's going to come along. We are not coming back. It just seems to be so final. Because they almost just say, well, there'll be another ship called the Enterprise, I'm sure. We're not necessarily going to be on it, but there will be one.
But in fact, it's a setup for a movie that that at this stage, they already knew they were going to make.
Yeah, it's just such a weird way of doing things, yeah.
The question is not, are we going to make another Star Trek movie? The question is what is the next Star Trek movie going to look like? Now, by this point, Star Trek is transformed into the tentpole for Paramount.
Yeah,
I mean, at least with James Bond films, it used to say James Bond will return in. I mean, they could they do that. It's like,
Can I throw in one final thought?
Yeah, of course.
Real quickly, their first thought when putting this together was to get Leonard Nimoy to direct, and apparently Rick Berman and Leonard Nimoy were close friends, so it seemed like a natural thing. Okay. They brought in Nimoy, and he said one thing to them. He held up the script and said, "This needs a page 1 rewrite," and Berman basically told Nimoy to go fuck himself. And that completely ended their friendship.
Oh.
And I tell you, if I ever go to the Nexus, I'm going to go see the version of this film where they let Leonard Nimoy not only direct it but do a page one rewrite.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm just gonna jump on really quick. The movie postal is still gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
The movie postal
Oh, yeah.
with Kirk and Picard and the Enterprise and the Starfield, like that poster was hanging up in my bedroom in 6th grade
Yeah.
for fucking ever. And the movie that I imagined on that postal is still way better than this film.
You're seeing the fans setting the seats on fire version like me.
Yeah.
The Nexus version is that poster.
And those one other thing, like if you're dying for TOS Next Generation crossover, there is a novel I'm going to point you in the direction of.
Okay.
It's The Federation, written by Reeves and Garfield and Judith Reeves Stevens. They were husband and wife writing duo.
Yep.
And they were in episodes of Enterprise. The storyline follows the adventures of Kirk right after Journey to Babel, and in Next Generation, sometime I think in season 5. I'm going off of an old memory.
Yeah.
But they have concurrent storylines where they're dealing with sort of the same problem.
Yeah.
And at the very end of the culminating point of the two is the two ships do a flyby to one another. And like the whole movie builds up to the flyby. And Picard breaks temporal prime directive, and he sends the original series message saying that the Enterprise survives. And that book is way more better than in terms of like setting up a crossover that has stakes and consequences than this 2-hour-long film.
Next week is First Contact. What do you guys think of, without having rewatched it?
Okay.
Is this a thumbs up or a A? What do you think?
Yeah, I forgot. Right there, this is getting right, because you obviously we've got 4, and it's like, oh, First Contact's coming soon. Yes, First Contact is my favorite of the 4, definitely.
And by the way, I want to thank the people that have been watching the show. Walt and Walt Robilliard, an old friend of the BAMF show, and Aspie Snow. I don't know who you. I don't know you, but thank you so much for watching. A lot of us wish that we were watching the Nexus version of this movie. But Chris, Jim, First Contact.
It's my favorite Deep Space Nine movie that for some reason has the Next Generation cast in it.
Okay. Okay. Jim?
I don't much care for First Contact.
I have not seen this film since it first came out. And I remember thinking that the action scenes were really like not the space combat stuff, but the actual like individuals moving around in space were kind of let down and slow and ponderous.
Also, don't forget though, First Contact has breakaway star Lieutenant Hawk in it, so.
See, I don't even remember Lieutenant Hawk. So I need to
I love the fact that AIDS line in the sand. It's watching these films. It's callbacks to Lieutenant Hawk.
If it weren't for the Mandalorian messing it all up, he would kind of be the Boba Fett of Star Trek.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy. Watch yourselves out there and empathize with your neighbor. That's if there's something that Star Trek has taught us is think about what it's like to live life of somebody very different than yourself. And we will see you a week from today. Thanks, everyone.
You know, Abe, there's one thing that I didn't want to say